Did that right. It looks like it. Hi everybody, Austin here. My first video recap. I'm kind of losing my voice a little bit, so bear with me. I've had a really long day. Yeah, so I wanted to go over my AXSM trade over the last couple days. It's a good example of one of the things I look for in a good long setup. So what I'm going to be talking about today primarily is what I like to call high steady volume consolidation. Now, what is that? It's a mouthful. Basically, it's my philosophy that if a stock is consolidating at a really high volume, consolidation is basically, for me, consolidation means that the stock is trying to determine whether it can go up or down. And in my opinion, from what I've seen, if a stock is consolidating on really high volume, that's proving that the stock has a lot of interest at the current price level. And in a way, it's like the stock is asking permission to the market participants, hey, can I trade higher? Is there enough interest at me at this level? If there's enough interest, in me at this price level, how about the next price level? So let's take a look at this. And the reason why I say high steady volume consolidation is because of one thing. I disregard volume for this theory in the instances when stocks are ascending in price rapidly or descending in price rapidly. Why? Because stocks, and in the first 5 minutes of the day. Why? Because stocks always have high volume in the first 5 minutes of the day. Stocks will always have high volume when they're surging, and stocks will always have high volume when they're tanking. In most cases, there are situations where they're on air, but for the most part, you'll see high volume in those areas. And for me, there's how can I differentiate between if it's important volume, like if the volume is trying to tell me something, or if it's just volume that's going to be there no matter what. So let's take a look at day one on AXSM. The reason why this got on my radar is because it was up 200%. That's the reason why it was on most people's radar. It was actually kind of weird for me that this was up 200%, because I didn't really deem this news worthy of 200% at first, and immediately I was thinking about the short. Immediately. It was phase 2 news, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of phase 2 news in my life. And I don't know, for me, they're normally like, 40 or 50% that I would see. This one was up 200, and I was like, really? For phase 2? I can imagine phase 3, but phase 2 is a big deal, and I think the market was rebounding off of my SPY chart's normally over there, so I looked over instinctively. The SPY was recovering from a bounce, and also LABU, the biotech, the 3 times biotech was just surging that day. It was up like 15%. So I figured that had those two factors were a part of that as well. So I went with it, but I still wanted to short it. And right at the open, I got a little bit of cold feet. I don't like to place trades right at the open, because I typically like to see what they're going to do first. And this one, of course, just tanked right out of the gate on heavy volume, heavy selling. I remember seeing that tape was so thick that you couldn't fill anything on the ask. There was just no buyers. It was straight death for the first 5 or 10 minutes. And after that, it almost sketched me out too much on potentially longing it. But I said in chat that I was ideally looking to short it, but if it showed that it could sustain a really high volume, I was interested in potentially longing it, as long as it could prove to me that it could hold some kind of level and that it showed a decent amount of volume. So let's zoom in here. This is the kind of, so yeah, I don't count this volume. It's tanking. It's always going to have volume. But then the volume continued after it tanked. After it tanked, it showed that it still had a high amount of volume from like 9:40 to 10:30. It was trading an average of like, I don't know, or a mode of like 100,000 shares a minute, more even. And that's of course relative to the float. Like if you look at Apple, Apple has a huge float, so it trades 100 shares a minute every single day, and nobody bats an eye. This has a 20 million share float, a little less if you consider holdings, but that's still pretty high for what I trade, but it's still low in the grand scheme of things. So 100,000 shares a minute is very high volume for the stock. And if you look at the daily chart, there really is like no other day like this before on that daily chart. Like this is the most ever. So it's really significant volume. Like it's never traded 100,000 shares a minute before ever. So to me, this right here is the stock it's consolidating, and the fact that it's holding here for like 30 minutes to an hour gets me interested. So what I'm looking for, now that I see my volume, now that the stock is telling me, it's asking me, I might want to try and see, there's so much interest in me here at 6. Let me see if there's interest in me at 650 and then 7. So what I'm looking for is some kind of strength, something to tell me that this stock is ready to make an attempt. And normally what I like to see, like as a general rule for all of my trades, one thing I like to see for longs and shorts are, when I enter a trade, I want to see the opposite thesis of mine fail first. So an example of this is this big breakdown, like this the first bottom the stock ever had was $6. So fast forward like 15 minutes, we get this nice long big volume candle, sell-off candle, breakdown candle, and we find a short bottom right under that, and then we immediately reclaim. To me, this is the first sign. This reclaim of 6 right away, not right away, but after some volume. It didn't really go much lower than 6. That's what I mean by right away. It only hit a low of 575. This is a reclaim for me. And then it tries 2 more times to break down at 6. And so for me, it's failed to break 6 once, twice, 3 times. So I have my volume and I have my failed thesis. So now I'm looking for an entry. And I'm sorry I don't have the arrows. Like DAS doesn't keep the arrows for more than a day, and it looks like actually as I recorded this, the arrows from today are gone too, but I have those screenshotted, and I'll show that later. Anyway, I ended up, the level that I was really looking forward to was a 625 to 630 level, and I remember it happening so fast. I got in on this candle, on this big volume candle. I tried to get in at the break of 625, and I missed, and so I chased it up. I ended up getting 635 as an entry for half of my size, and then I even moved it up more. I put it up to 641 to get the rest of the half because I was okay with chasing this a little bit. I know it was right on VWAP, but there was part of me that said this is now or never, and at this point my risk is now on 6. It failed to break down once, twice, and 3 times. I'm in at 635 and I'm risking 6, and for me, I would really like to get $1 out of this trade. If I could get $1 out of that trade, that's a 3-to-1 risk to reward ratio, at least on a third of my size for my home run aspect of the trade. And so we immediately get the pop, and I'm happy. I immediately sell 1/3 of my size here at 674. Now this is because I have developed a system that works for me. My system is, when I enter a trade and I have 3 different exits in mind. One exit is a scalp. 1/3 of my trade size is for scalp. 1/3 of my trade size is for a trade, and 1/3 of my trade size is for what I consider to be a home run. And it could be relevant. The home run can be you don't get in until the end of you don't get out until the end of the day. You don't get out until you see lower lows. You don't get out until you see a stuff. It could be you get out at $1 or like some kind of. It's all relevant depending on the stock for me. But for this one, after this selling pressure and the pre-market highs here at around 750, for me, if I could get back up to 750, that was a home run in my book, especially after a dry spell. There hasn't been a really, really good runner for me since MRIN. So I was a little bit desperate for the cash. Anyhow, so I immediately sold like 1/3 here, and this is where I could have gotten back in, but I didn't because of this such overhead selling. I was almost afraid to enter back in. But I really like these failed attempts to break VWAP up. And had I not been in, this would have been another entry of mine. If I was not in, this is where I would have got in. And in hindsight, I really should have. But because I was already long from earlier, and this was still freaking me out a little bit on the long side, I didn't add up here. But instead, I was selling. So I sold another third, my trade position, right in here in the 90s. And we immediately got up to 750, and I sold a third of my size at 745, 55, and 65. And I was happy with the trade. And I was done with it for the day. Yeah, and in hindsight, it went a lot higher, and I don't care. I was happy to break my dry spell, and it was a great trade. Could have done better. If we get more of these, maybe I'll be able to be more patient. But anyway, fast forward till tomorrow. And we see a similar thing. And yeah, so this is tomorrow. No, this is today. Okay. So again, we see this. This is day 2. So day 2 rarely, it's not often going to have the same volume as day 1, unless it gaps higher, which this one kind of did. But it didn't gap very much higher, so like the volume wasn't as good as the first day. But again, today it was very choppy today and much harder. Crap. It was very choppy today and much harder. I think I posted in chat like, "Hey, be careful. This is going to be very swingy. Like it's going to go higher than you think and lower than you think, and you know it's very easy to sell the bottom of this or cover the top because there's so many people that are trying to decide what this is going to do that it's making it very emotionally traded in my mind." But anyway, so we get to the open, and I ignore the open volume. And so like about 10 to 15 minutes after, I notice, hey, look, we have this high volume again, and we have a breakdown. We had a breakdown of this $8 level, which isn't the main level. The main level was 780, but this was an attempt to break down for sure. So this was my first sign. The first sign was the continued volume down here and the hold. The continued volume and the hold. This held on really high volume when I'm sure after this fail here, everyone had to be thinking 750. So what we get is we get a pop, a sign of life, and now I'm just waiting for an entry. Like the volume saying high, we get a little dip in volume here, and I was a little concerned that we might roll over. But when we came back to life here, I knew I wanted to be in because this is the second fail to break on the downside. This is a higher low. And so I got in here. Actually, let me just pull this up here. This is the one I posted in chat, but I just did a screenshot, thankfully, a couple minutes ago. Yeah, here it is. Actually no, this one was earlier. I did one just a minute ago. Okay, the earlier one will do fine. Yeah, so I actually bought right here. I wanted to get in over 835, but because that would have been the higher high, and I'm a big higher high and lower low shorter. I don't like to really short into strength anymore or buy into dips. I've just slowly grown accustomed to buying breaks and shorting lows with fixed risk. I tend to like that better. But anyway, I bought here, and I missed. This was so fast. This volume candle was so fast. And again, like longs are kind of tough this way. Sometimes you don't always get that good price. Like I was okay with chasing here, and right around here, my stop was kind of like this 8 to 810 area. So the risk wasn't that great, but it was at least 1-to-1, and after the setup was really good, I was going to take a 1-to-1 trade on this guy. And fortunately, I kind of got the top, but I'm going to tell you what, this was lucky. This is absolutely lucky. Like, you know, the prior day high was 9, so that was like the idea of the trade. Like, this had been choppy all morning, so I knew that if I didn't Like if I didn't take the profit, I knew it was going to get taken away. And again, it's been a dry spell, so I took this one. I took this one for fast money. You know, you can see here's my scalp. Here's kind of my trade. I had a shorter time frame for this. Here's my scalp. Here's my trade. Here's my, you know, home run. It's not really a home run. It's 50 cents. But on the choppy name like this, I was willing to take that 50 cents. And it's kind of just like the yesterday trade. You know, there's high volume that it's high steady volume that proves to me that the stock wants to try higher. A failed attempt to break down, and you know, if I were short, this is where I'm covering, man. This is where I'm covering. If I shorted for this breakdown, and like I withstood this somehow, and I didn't cover on this perk, and then it tanked, and I have a secondary feel of relief, I'm getting out if this breaks. And that's exactly where I entered as a long, and that's where a lot of my longs kind of ideas started. You know, like I kept getting stopped out on a short, and you know, I'm like, you know, I'm gonna start buying where I, you know, stop out for a loss, because typically, like I stop out and it's typically a right cover, thank God. But anyway, that was the idea of this trade: the high steady volume consolidation, and the philosophy that what that means is it's asking the stock to go higher. And a good example to kind of prove this by trial and error is, like, look at this stock RHE today. A lot of stocks you're gonna see a lot of stocks like this. Now this one was like driven by newsletter, I think. But newsletter or not, what you're gonna see a lot of is stocks that spike up in the morning, and then kind of like you'll see the volume just fade. And when the volume's done, so's the stock, because there's just no interest in this trading at 2:30. Like the volume dies. Like right when it's up here, this is when the stock should be trading. Like, you know, like it had a couple candles over 100,000 shares. You know, AXSM had every candle over 100,000 shares, and this is a $2 stock, and AXSM was like a $7 stock, a $6 stock. So that even greater so. I'm pretty sure this has a smaller float too. So it just goes to show that, like, there is some kind of, it seems to be that there is some kind of reasoning to the, you know, if there's steady volume, that's the stock trying to say, higher, please. Let me see if I can go. And if it stuffs, it's not going to work. You know, that happens sometimes. But for me, this is my first edge. This is, I would say, the first edge I ever learned in longs, was this high, steady volume consolidation. Write it down. I know I did. I looked at hundreds of charts before I coined that phrase, that mouthful. Anyway, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any more. If you like if I didn't address anything, please feel free to DM me or PM me in chat. Also, I'd love to have feedback. This is my first recap ever.